The bitter Wyoming wind cut through the thin coats of 12-year-old twins Samuel and Benjamin Sullivan as they stood shivering on the porch of the Circle W Ranch. 3 days of walking through the harsh frontier landscape had left them exhausted, hungry, and desperate enough to make an offer that broke the heart of anyone who truly understood what it meant. Ranch owner Will Carson opened the door to find two boys who looked like scarecrows come to life. Their clothes were patched and dirty, their faces hollow with hunger, and their eyes held the kind of desperation that came from having nowhere left to turn. "Please, Mr. Samuel said, his voice barely above a whisper, "we're looking for work. Any kind of work." Will studied the two boys, noting their obvious exhaustion and the way they held hands as if afraid of being separated. "How old are you kids?" 12, sir," Benjamin replied, trying to stand straighter despite his weakness. "We're strong for our age, and we're not afraid of hard work. Where are your parents?" The twins exchanged a glance filled with shared pain. "Dead, sir," Samuel said quietly. "Fever took them last month. The bank took our house for debts, and we got nowhere else to go." Will felt his chest tighten with sympathy. He had built his ranch from nothing through hard work and determination, but he remembered what it felt like to be alone and desperate in an unforgiving world. "What kind of work are you looking for?" he asked gently. "Anything you need, sir," Benjamin said eagerly. "We can clean, cook, tend animals, mend fences. We learn fast and we work hard." Samuel stepped forward, his young voice carrying the weight of someone who had grown up to fast. "We'll work for free forever if you'll just let us stay. We don't need wages or fancy food, just a place to sleep and enough to eat so we don't starve." The words hit Will like a physical blow. Two children, barely more than babies, offering to work as unpaid labor for the rest of their lives just for the basic necessities of survival. It was an offer that revealed the depths of their desperation and the cruel realities of frontier life for those with no resources or protection. Will was quiet for a long moment, studying these brave children who had walked into his life carrying nothing but each other and their willingness to sacrifice everything for a chance at survival. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "Boys, I think we need to have a proper conversation about this." He stepped aside and nodded toward the door. "But first, let's get you inside where it's warm." Samuel and Benjamin looked at each other with amazement and desperate hope. They had been turned away from so many doors, told to move along by so many adults, that the simple invitation to come inside seemed like a miracle. "You mean it, sir," Samuel whispered. "We can come in, more than that," Will said with a smile that reached his weathered eyes. "You can sit by the fire, have some hot food, and we'll talk about what kind of arrangement might work for all of us." The interior of the ranch house was everything the twins had dreamed of during their cold nights. Sleeping in abandoned barns and under bridges, a fire crackled in the stone fireplace, filling the room with warmth and light. Comfortable furniture arranged around the hearth spoke of prosperity and stability. That seemed like impossible luxury to boys who had been living rough for weeks. "Sit down," Will said, gesturing toward chairs near the fire. "Let me get you something to eat, and then we'll discuss your situation properly." As Will disappeared into the kitchen, the twins huddled together by the fire, hardly daring to believe that someone was actually showing them kindness instead of suspicion or indifference. "Samuel," Benjamin whispered, "do you think he'll really let us stay?" "I don't know," Samuel replied, but his voice carried more hope than it had in weeks. "But he seems different from the others. He looked at us like we were people, not just nuisances." Will returned with bowls of hearty beef stew, fresh bread, and milk that was still warm from the cow. The boys tried to eat slowly to maintain some dignity, but their hunger was too great. They devoured the meal with the desperate intensity of children who had known real starvation. "Easy there, boys," Will said gently. "There's plenty more where that came from. No need to make yourselves sick." When they had finished eating, Will settled into a chair across from them, his weathered face serious but kind. "Now then, Samuel and Benjamin, let's talk about this offer of yours." The boys tensed, expecting to be told that their services weren't needed, that they should move along to the next ranch or town. "You said you'd work for free forever," Will continued. That tells me two things. First, that you're desperate enough to offer something no person should ever have to offer. And second, that you don't really understand your own worth. Samuel and Benjamin looked at each other uncertainly. Sir, Samuel said hesitantly, boys, I've been ranching for 20 years, and I've learned that good help is worth its weight in gold. But more than that, I've learned that every person has value that goes beyond what they can do with their hands. Will leaned forward, his eyes serious and kind. Here's what I'm going to propose. You can stay here. You'll have your own room, 3 meals a day, and proper clothes. In return, you'll help with age-appropriate ranch work, but you'll also go to school and learn to read and write properly. School? Benjamin asked with surprise. Education. Will confirmed, because I'm not looking for permanent laborers. I'm looking for boys who can grow into men with options in life. Samuel's eyes filled with tears he tried to hide. But sir, we can't pay you for school or proper food or, boys, Will interrupted gently. You're not paying me anything, and you're not working for free. This is what we call taking care of. Family, family, both boys said simultaneously. Will smiled at their amazement. Well, I figured boys who've taken care of each other through the worst times life can throw at them deserve a chance to be part of something bigger. What do you say? The twins looked at each other, communicating in the silent way that only twins could. Finally, Samuel spoke for both of them. Mr. Carson, we'd be honored to be part of your family. Will stood up and extended his hand. Then welcome home, boys. Welcome to the Circle W. As they shook hands with the man who had just changed their lives forever, Samuel and Benjamin realized that they had offered to work for free forever, but instead had received something priceless, a home, a future, and the knowledge that they mattered to someone. The door Will had nodded toward hadn't just been an entrance to his house. It had been the doorway to a completely new life. Subscribe to our channel to see what happens next. How will Samuel and Benjamin adapt to their new life on the ranch? What challenges and adventures await as they learn to be part of a real family? Don't miss the next chapter of this heartwarming story of hope and belonging. The first month at the Circle W Ranch was a revelation for 12-year-old twins Samuel and Benjamin Sullivan. Will Carson had been true to his word, providing them with a comfortable room, regular meals, and most importantly, the patient understanding of someone who knew that healing from desperation took time. Boys, Will said one morning as they helped him repair a section of fence, I've been thinking about your education. There's a school in town, but it's a 12-mile ride each way. Samuel paused in his work, his face showing concern. Mr. Carson, if the school's too far or costs too much, we don't need to go. We can learn what we need from helping you. Will studied the boy's expression, seeing the familiar fear that opportunities might be taken away as quickly as they were offered. Samuel, what did I tell you about your worth when you first arrived? That we have value beyond what we can do with our hands, Benjamin replied, remembering the conversation that had changed their understanding of themselves. Exactly. And education isn't a luxury or a burden. It's an investment in your future. Will set down his hammer and looked at both boys seriously. I've arranged for Miss Patterson, the school teacher, to come out to the ranch 3 days a week. She'll teach you reading, writing, arithmetic, and whatever else you need to know. The twins exchanged glances of amazement. In their experience, adults didn't invest time and money in orphan children unless they expected significant labor in return. Sir, Samuel said carefully, what do you want from us in exchange for all this? Will's expression grew sad at the question, understanding that these boys had learned to see kindness as a transaction rather than a gift. Samuel, I want you and Benjamin to grow into good men who have choices in life. I want you to know that you're capable of anything you set your minds to. That's not an exchange. That's what family does for each other. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a familiar carriage, Dr. Mitchell from town, accompanied by a stern-looking woman in dark clothes, who introduced herself as Mrs. Hartwell from the Territorial Children's Services. Mr. Carson, Dr. Mitchell said formally, Mrs. Hartwell has received reports about 2 orphan children living on your ranch. She's here to investigate their welfare. Will felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice calm. Of course, Mrs. Hartwell, I'm happy. to show you round and answer any questions you might have." Samuel and Benjamin moved closer to Will, their faces showing the fear of children who had learned that official visits often meant family separations. Mrs. Hartwell was a woman whose life's work had made her suspicious of any arrangement that didn't fit standard procedures. "Mr. Carson, these boys should be in a proper orphanage where they can receive structured care and moral instruction. And what kind of care are they receiving here?" Will asked pointedly. Mrs. Hartwell consulted her notes: irregular education, potential exploitation for labor, and exposure to rough frontier conditions unsuitable for developing minds. Samuel stepped forward, his young voice clear and determined. "Ma'am, with respect, Mr. Carson isn't exploiting us. He's teaching us skills we'll need as men, making sure we get proper schooling, and treating us like we matter." "Young man, Mrs. Hartwell replied condescendingly. "Children often don't understand what's best for their development." Benjamin joined his brother, their shared courage giving them strength. "Ma'am, we lived rough for weeks before we found Mr. Carson. We know what it's like to be hungry and cold and scared. We also know what it's like to be treated with kindness and respect." Will placed protective hands on both boys' shoulders. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'd like you to examine their living conditions, their health, and their educational progress before making any judgments." What followed was the most thorough inspection the twins had ever experienced. Mrs. Hartwell examined their room, their clothes, their books, and even tested their reading and arithmetic skills that had improved dramatically under Miss Patterson's instruction. "These boys seem well cared for," Mrs. Hartwell admitted grudgingly. "But the irregular nature of this arrangement concerns me. A single man raising two boys without proper oversight." "Mum," Will said firmly, "I have legal guardianship papers, properly filed with the territorial court. These boys are exactly where they belong." Dr. Mitchell, who had been observing quietly, finally spoke. "Mrs. Hartwell, I've known Will Carson for 15 years. He's one of the most honorable men in this territory. These boys are clearly thriving under his care." As the officials prepared to leave, Mrs. Hartwell delivered a warning. "Mr. Carson will be conducting periodic inspections to ensure continued appropriate care." After the visitors departed, Will knelt down to the twins' eye level. "Boys, I want you to know that no inspector or official is going to separate us. You're my family now, and families stick together. But what if they decide we'd be better off in an orphanage?" Samuel asked, his voice tight with worry. "Then I'll fight that decision with everything I have," Will replied firmly. "Samuel, Benjamin, you are not charity cases or temporary arrangements. You're my sons in every way that matters." The word sons hit both boys with the force of a revelation. They had hoped to be tolerated, maybe even liked, but to be considered actual sons was beyond their wildest dreams. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Will made an announcement that further solidified their sense of belonging. "Boys, I've been thinking about the future of the ranch. Someday, when I'm too old to run this place, it's going to need new leadership." "What kind of leadership?" Benjamin asked with curiosity. "The kind that understands the value of hard work, the importance of treating people fairly, and the responsibility that comes with success." Will smiled at both boys. "The kind of leadership that you two could provide, if you're interested." Samuel's eyes widened with disbelief. "You mean you'd leave the ranch to us?" "I mean I'd leave it to my sons," Will corrected gently. "Not because you're obligated to work for free forever, but because your family and families take care of each other across generations." 3 months later, the transformation in both boys was remarkable. They had grown taller and stronger with proper nutrition. Their hollow cheeks had filled out, and most importantly, their eyes now held confidence instead of desperation. "Will," Samuel said one evening, using the name their guardian had invited them to use, "we want to ask you something." "What's that, son?" "We want to change our last name to Carson," Benjamin added. "We want people to know we belong to this family." Will felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Boys, nothing would make me prouder than to have you carry the Carson name. But you should know that you already belong to this family, regardless of what name you use." "We know," Samuel said with a smile, "but we want the whole world to know it too." As they sat on the ranch house porch that evening, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in brilliant colors. Will reflected on how much their lives had changed since that desperate day, when two frightened boys had offered to work for free. Forever, Will, Benjamin said thoughtfully. Do you think there are other kids out there like we were, desperate and scared with nowhere to go? I'm sure there are, son. Why? Well, we were thinking. This ranch is big, and we're learning to manage it well. Maybe someday we could help other kids the way you helped us. Will smiled with pride at the boys' generous hearts. That's a fine idea. Benjamin, maybe the Circle W can become known as a place where lost children can find their way home. Subscribe to our channel to see the heartwarming conclusion. How will Samuel and Benjamin's plan to help other children unfold? What legacy will they build on the foundation of kindness they've received? Don't miss the final chapter where two boys who offered to work for free learned to give freely to others. 5 years had passed since 12-year-old twins Samuel and Benjamin Sullivan had stood shivering on Will Carson's porch, offering to work for free forever in exchange for basic survival. Now 17, the Carson boys, as they were known throughout the territory, had grown into confident young men whose story had become legendary in Wyoming and beyond. The Circle W Ranch had prospered under their joint management, but more importantly, it had become exactly what Benjamin had envisioned, a place where lost children could find their way home. Over the years, Will and his sons had taken in 8 more orphaned or abandoned children, creating a family that was bound not by blood, but by choice and love. Samuel, Benjamin, Will called out one crisp autumn morning as the twins worked with a new colt in the training corral. We've got visitors coming up the road. The boys looked toward the approaching riders and immediately recognized the lead figure, Judge Harrison, the territorial magistrate who had overseen their own adoption papers. Behind him rode several other officials and what appeared to be 2 young children. Judge Harrison, Samuel called out with genuine warmth as the group reached the ranch. Good to see you, sir. The judge dismounted with a smile, his weathered face showing the satisfaction of a man who had witnessed many happy endings during his years on the bench. Samuel, Benjamin, you boys are looking well. Ranch life has certainly agreed with you. What brings you out our way, Judge? Will asked, though his experienced eyes had already noted the 2 small figures huddled behind one of the other riders. I'm afraid it's a situation you've become experts at handling, Judge Harrison replied. The cholera outbreak near Cheyenne has left us with more orphan children. These 2, Mary and Peter Walsh, lost their parents last week. Benjamin immediately knelt down as the children were helped from the horses, his own experience allowing him to connect with their fear and confusion in ways that adults often couldn't. Hey there, he said gently to the girl, who couldn't have been more than 8. I'm Benjamin, and this is my brother Samuel. We know how scared you must be right now. Mary looked up at him with eyes that held the same desperation the twins remembered feeling 5 years ago. Are you gonna send us to the workhouse? No, sweetheart, Samuel said, kneeling beside his brother. We're going to make sure you and Peter have a safe place to stay, good food to eat, and people who care about you. Will stepped forward, his decision already made before the judge had finished explaining the situation. Mary, Peter, welcome to the Circle W Ranch. You can stay as long as you need, and if you decide you like it here, you can stay forever. Over the following weeks, Samuel and Benjamin found themselves becoming mentors to Mary and Peter, sharing their own story and helping the children understand that their terrible loss didn't define their worth or limit their potential. Benjamin, Mary said one evening as she helped with the horses, a task that had become her favorite. Samuel told me you and him used to be scared and hungry like us. That's right, Benjamin replied, brushing down the mare Mary had been learning to care for. When we first came here, we were so desperate we offered to work for free forever just for a place to sleep. What did Mr. Carson say? Benjamin smiled, remembering that life-changing conversation. He told us we were worth more than what we could do with our hands. He taught us that our value came from who we were as people, not what we could provide in exchange for kindness. Mary was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Do you think Peter and I are worth something too? Mary, Benjamin said seriously, kneeling down to her eye level. You and Peter are worth everything. You're smart, brave, kind, and you take care of each other. Those are the most valuable things in the world." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor, a well-dressed man in an expensive carriage, who introduced himself as Attorney Morrison from the territorial capital. "Mr. Carson," Morrison said formally, "I represent the estate of Harold Walsh, the children's uncle. There are significant inheritance matters that need to be resolved." Will felt his protective instincts engage immediately. "What kind of inheritance matters?" Mr. Walsh left considerable assets, but only if Mary and Peter are raised in what he termed appropriate circumstances with formal education and proper social connections. Samuel and Benjamin exchanged glances, remembering their own experience with officials who believed institutions were better than loving homes. "And what would you consider appropriate circumstances?" Will asked carefully. Morrison consulted his papers, the Walsh Academy for Orphan Children in Denver. It's a prestigious institution that prepares children for successful careers in business and society. Mary pressed closer to Benjamin, clearly frightened by the talk of being sent away from the only place she had felt safe since her parents' death. "Mr. Morrison," Benjamin said firmly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had found his strength, "these children are receiving excellent care and education here. They're learning practical skills, academic subjects, and most importantly, they're learning that they're valued and loved." "Young man," Morrison replied condescendingly, "while I'm sure your intentions are admirable, a ranch hardly provides the refined environment necessary for proper development." That's when Samuel's patience ran out. "Mr. Morrison, this ranch has produced successful businessmen, community leaders, and good citizens. We've taken children who were broken by loss and helped them become confident, capable young people." Will stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. "Mr. Morrison, I'd like to see the exact terms of this inheritance, and I want these children to have proper legal representation, not someone working to expedite a predetermined outcome." The legal battle that followed took 3 months, but it revealed something important. The inheritance was real, but the restrictions were designed more to control the children than to benefit them. With proper legal counsel, they proved that the Circle W Ranch provided everything the will required and more. Most importantly, when Mary and Peter were old enough to understand the choice, they chose to stay with the family that had welcomed them with open arms, rather than pursue an inheritance that would have separated them from the people they loved. "Will," Samuel said one evening as they sat on the ranch porch, now a tradition that included all the children they had taken in over the years, "Benjamin and I have been talking about the future." "What about the future?" "We want to expand what we're doing here," Benjamin explained. "Create an official program to help orphan children throughout the territory. Maybe work with other ranches and families to create more opportunities." Will smiled with pride at his son's vision. "That's a wonderful idea, boys. How would you want to structure something like that?" "Well," Samuel said thoughtfully, "we could partner with the territorial government to identify children who need homes, provide training for families who want to help, and create a network of support throughout the West. And maybe," Benjamin added, "we could establish a fund to help with education and startup costs for young people who age out of the system." Will nodded approvingly. "Boys, your parents would be amazed to see the men you've become, from children who offered to work for free forever to young men who want to give freely to others." Years later, the Carson Family Foundation would become the most successful child welfare organization in the American West, helping thousands of orphan children find loving homes and opportunities for successful lives. Samuel would become a territorial legislator, advocating for child welfare laws, while Benjamin would manage the foundation's day-to-day operations. But that evening, as they gathered around the dinner table with their extended family of children who had found their way to the Circle W, they understood that their most important accomplishment wasn't the legislation or the programs or the recognition. It was the simple fact that to frightened boys who had once offered to work for free forever had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that the greatest wealth comes not from what we can earn, but from what we can give, and that the strongest families are built not on obligation, but on the choice to love unconditionally. The door Will had nodded toward that first desperate day hadn't just led to shelter from the storm. It had led to a legacy of compassion that would outlast them all, proving that sometimes the most generous hearts grow in those who remember what it felt like to have nothing and receive everything. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories from the American frontier. This incredible tale of Samuel, Benjamin, and Will proves that the most valuable work we can do is often unpaid, and that the greatest inheritance we can leave is the knowledge that every child deserves love, opportunity, and the chance to become who they're meant to be. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to join us for more emotional journeys that show how one act of kindness can create ripples of compassion that change entire communities. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that their worth isn't measured by what they can give, but by who they choose to become.